All right, let's get started for today's session. So today's session is technology and innovation in youth work. And before I start introducing the session, I'd like to touch on my experience with technology, especially through 2020 and 2021. Zoom has been a big part of my life for not my own job with social media, but also doing lots of other things, including school and meetings and doing like at-home workouts. So technology has been a big part of my life and I have learned so much. And without technology, I don't know where we would be right now. And this technology has helped us put on this awesome conference. So my technology experience, I was not all that good before we came across 2020. And I've managed to get quite good at the computer and Zoom and all of the fun stuff. And now I've just become a computer whiz, which is always great. But let's get started on the session. The use of technology in the past 12 months has been massive, and through online working, all that kind of fun stuff. And without that type of accessible environment to be able to go online and use it, especially for youth people, we wouldn't be where we are right now, being able to chat to all our friends and peers. But hold on, just reading my notes, I apologize. We learned from, let me start again. As I said to myself, I will jumble up. But through the past 12 months, we've really learned a lot through technology. And without technology, we wouldn't be on Zoom right now chatting to all you fabulous people. Today, we have a lineup of awesome people to come along and chat to us about their experience with technology and all the fun behind the scenes computery stuff. But I'm now going to hand over to the fabulous Sam Champion as he chats to our wonderful speakers. So I'll now welcome Sam to the stage. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brody. And what a great job you've done over the last couple of days. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm zooming in from the Boonwurrung country today. I'd like to begin by paying my respects to elders past and present. I'd like to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. This beautiful land has been cared for by First Nations people for well over 60,000 years. And I stand in awe of that incredible history and ongoing connection to culture and country. A visual description of me to kick off. I have white skin and shaved hair. I have a very short, almost beard. I wear glasses. And I've chosen a long sleeve vintage green-grey shirt with stars and squares for this special occasion. I was born in the UK and I speak with an English accent, although my family back home might disagree. So I'm super excited for this session. We have international, national and state voices on this panel, ranging from global experts on using technology in youth work, right through to place-based projects in country Victoria. So 18 months ago, it would have been utterly unthinkable for us at YACVic to be running a conference entirely online. I mean, I'll be honest, we didn't even have a TV in our boardroom. And yet here we are. What a great couple of days it's been. And so before I go on, I just want to give a massive shout out to my YACVic colleagues who've been able to make this all happen. We did it. Well done, everyone. And thinking back to March last year and reflecting on the many conversations that I've had with workers across the States, it's been clear to me that we were not prepared in any way to move online when the pandemic began. For many, it was the first time we'd even tried to connect with young people in any sort of meaningful way with technology outside of email or possibly a Google Doc here or there. Our ambitions were set really low. The real potential of technology still hasn't really been harnessed. We tried hard to replicate in-person meetings and events, and we were surprised that there were some advantages. There were some advantages for connecting with those who lived further away and for whom in-person activities were not necessarily accessible. We found that for some people that jumping on a Zoom call was much easier than having to travel from home or school or work. We found that there were some advantages for disabled participants who could participate in a way that was sometimes more accessible and where technology could be controlled and adapted in a way that physical environments just can't. We also found that the introverts in the group could now use the chat function and reactions, emojis, memes, to communicate in a whole new way. But we also found that broadband inequities meant there was still a disadvantage experienced by rural and remote young people. We also found that whilst young people are digital natives, they definitely aren't sitting around communicating via Zoom. And this stilted format of communication just wasn't engaging for many young people. So now, in the middle of 2021, we find ourselves in a place where we haven't yet transitioned into a new era. We have the perfect opportunity to reflect and learn from our experiences and identify the practices we've developed that can be continued in order to create not just a new normal, but a better normal in a world where we work with young people using technology as our friend. So we've got 3 great speakers, and then we'll be moving into a Q&A. So our 3 speakers today are Juha Kiviniemi, who uses he, him pronouns. He's from the Centre of Expertise for Digital Youth Work in Verke in Finland. We have Elizabeth Smith, who uses she, her pronouns. She's the Programme Manager from Broadening Horizons Gippsland. And we have Jason McCurry, who uses he, him pronouns, the Youth Leadership Development Officer from Children and Young People with Disability Australia, or CYDA, as they're usually known across the sector. So our first speaker, Juha Kiviniemi from Verke, the Centre of Expertise for Digital Youth Work in Finland, which is seen as a world leader in all things related to technology and youth work. Juha heads up Verke's international activities and maker culture. He especially enjoys hosting training sessions and working on youth participation. In his free time, he's relaxed by swimming in international waters, I'm told, taking photographs and leather work, as well as heavy music. So I'm very excited to hand over to you now, Juha.
Thank you. Good morning from my side, since it is 7:25 in Helsinki, Finland, where I am connecting from, which is, of course, for a youth worker like myself, it's a very, very early morning, but I'm sure we will all manage. I am very pleased to be speaking with you in this conference, and thank you, Sam, for an excellent introduction. I'll be going through a bit on what happened on the Finnish and kind of the European circuits when the pandemic hit, and what we have thought and learned before, during, and hopefully what we will learn after the pandemic. My personal history is that I've been involved in all things youth work for about 15 years now, a bit over 15 years. And I'm really a nerd by heart. So I've been always interested in technology, and naturally, because as you all know, youth work is kind of a thing that you do based on your own personality and based on your own interests. So I've, of course, inserted technology always into the brand of youth work I've been conducting. And Verke was first founded in 2011. And I pretty quickly became aware of the people doing excellent work in Verke, and I kind of tried to insert myself into their activities as much as possible, so I could play with them. I often tell, if I'm speaking to students, for example, who are just beginning their youth work journey, I always say, find the people that do the most interesting stuff and try to work with them, because that's what works. And that's what worked for me as well. About 4 years ago, I got hired full-time into Verke, and I can really focus on this whole digital youth work thing full-time, which is, of course, marvelous for a technology geek like myself. Verke's mission is to, firstly, on a national level in Finland, but also in the European international youth work circuit, to really bring up the technology competences of youth practitioners on pretty much all levels. So we work directly with youth workers, we work with managers, we worked with organizations, but also policymakers to try to influence them so that successful digital youth work can actually be implemented, because there is an amount of support that's also required in order to actually make digital youth work happen. The way we do this is we produce a lot of information. If you would now go to our website at verke.org, you would see a lot of materials that are freely available that kind of touch either specific things about digital youth work, or, for example, how to think more strategically, or how digitalization should be seen as a phenomena affecting the whole youth field. We do practical trainings. We do a lot of this kind of consulting with organizations on a longer term basis to help them develop their practice into something permanent. So it's not just singular attempts at trying to implement digital youth work stuff. And I think one of our main challenges is really, or has been over the years, to try to broaden the perspective of digital youth work. The Finnish history is interesting also in the sense when we look at this pandemic, because the Finnish history of digital youth work is originally based on online youth work, and especially offering low threshold help, one-on-one help to young people needing assistance. And this has been already done since even before the internet. Some technology was used to lower the barrier of kids contacting youth workers. And what Verke has been advocating for years has been kind of the broadening of the scope of digital youth work to also include, for example, digital games, which has been really already accepted as a part of digital youth work. I myself, as Sam mentioned, I'm a proponent of maker culture. So all things concerning practical technology education, building robots to have kids engage with technology more, or learning programming through using microcontrollers in something like arts and crafts, for example. So doing all this kind of stuff. And what we talk more and more with practitioners is about how young people's social interactions, when they're moved into digital platforms, how it affects the competences needed, for example, or how different social skills, which are still needed, how they're implemented in a digital stage. And of course, if you look at the EU guidelines and EU kind of what the European Union is trying to achieve with young people is a lot about employability, and digitalization as a phenomena. Of course, it has a huge impact on young people's potential employment as well. So that's something youth work needs to consider when kids are learning non-formal skill or new skills in a non-formal setting. Well, when the pandemic hit over 500 days ago, which seems like ages ago, we noticed very quickly that although the Finnish history of online youth work was there, same thing, of course, happening in different European states as well, and all over the world, was that although the kind of as a field, we had in Finland already the idea of doing online youth work, so the justification was there. It wasn't anything new, but we got a lot of people asking us, like, I've never done any sort of online youth work before, as Sam mentioned, also about your local areas. A lot of practitioners had never done any online youth work. So we saw what we kind of already knew, that although the practice was there for the field, it was only singular practitioners in different projects that had actually done online youth work with kids. But we saw for organizations as well that those organizations that had a strategy in place for implementing digital youth work and implementing especially online activities, they were much quicker to adapt to the new situation. They already knew what competences they had, or what competences the practitioners had. They knew what they need to do in order to make digital youth work happen in this new pandemic situation. We also saw when when kind of restrictions relaxed and youth houses started opening again, and then a new wave hit and then youth houses closed again, we noticed that those organizations that thought about it more strategically, they were up and running much faster. So one thing that we saw in the Finnish landscape was that a lot of organizations thought about the online offerings only as kind of a band-aid, something to do to get by while we wait for youth houses to open again. And that's a really big kind of indicator of attitude towards digital youth work and young people's kind of digital realities. Because it also showed that the practices that were implemented in the first phase of the pandemic, they weren't really evaluated. They weren't really assessed to see what have we actually learned about offering these very quickly and hastily set up online environments. And of course, when you don't assess things, you tend to miss things. For example, this whole accessibility versus engagement thing is a very crucial point in any youth work offering. Are we reaching the young people that we need to reach, or we think we are reaching, or not? And are we realistic about who we can reach and who we cannot reach? There is kind of this thinking that if we build it, they will come. So if we just set up the service, then surely young people will use the service just because it exists. But necessarily, we don't have the capacity to actually explain and let people know what it is that we are offering. For me, a lot of these things come back to identifying our core offer of youth work. It's not about having a Discord server. Anyone can set up a Discord server. Rather, it's about building communities and seeing the worth of the youth work community that we already have and taking the core of that to an online environment. Yeah. A lot of the common questions were about data privacy, data protection. How do I use this and this service? Or maybe my municipality won't allow us to use that service. And it was a lot about inexperience in using different technologies. And for sure, a lot of practitioners have new competences now that we've done this for 500 days. But it's really about, again, the attitudes and figuring out really realistically what the offering is and whether that offering is reaching who we want it to reach. A lot of youth workers have said in recent surveys that they have realized that they're reaching young people that they have never reached before, which is, of course, it's a huge value for the youth work field to reach kids that haven't been reached. Then again, the discussions we haven't seen so far is, are we seeing who were maybe left behind? Because the digital gap is certainly there. Young people aren't digital natives, as we all know, but rather it's about youth work ensuring that young people have the competences to use technology, that they have access to technology so that they can actually access the youth work offering that we are putting out there. So in the future, what we obviously need to see is what has been the learning from all this. Now is a really good time to see, when we're coming out of the pandemic into a new normal, whether we are whether we have new understanding of what young people need and how they use online environments, how they use digital tools to connect with their peers, connect with their own tribes, as we often say. This is a really good time to capitalize, for organizations to capitalize on youth workers' newfound motivation, because a lot of youth workers have now seen the value of digital youth work and the value of digital approaches. It's also brought forth a lot of things, a lot of phenomena that many youth workers haven't been aware of, concerning, for example, how to build safer spaces for all participants, whether it's a live space or whether it's an online space. I have to give a shout out to my colleagues in Scotland. YouthLink Scotland does a lot of wonderful work around LGBT minorities and building safe online spaces for those minorities. So please do check them out. But again, it comes back to identifying the core and assessing and evaluating what do we keep from these offerings that we've built during the pandemic. What is worth saving? What is worth using the resources on? Because it's always about resources as well. Like, do we take that core and run with it with online things? Do we use them for a maker culture or some other digital offering? And really assessing and identifying what we've learned so far, and also what young people have learned about maybe what we can offer in the future. That's it from me at this point. Thank you, and I'll see you on the other side. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the Australian speakers as well. So back to you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Juha. That was absolutely fascinating. I could listen to, well, your voice possibly all day, but particularly hearing about the ins and outs of work in Finland and the way that youth work is approached. There's some real key similarities, but some major differences as well. And I think there's an awful lot to learn from this sharing that's going on. So thank you so much for giving up your time and your sleep to be here today. Next up, I'm very excited to be introducing Elizabeth Smith, who engages and supports schools and industry and community partners in Outer Gippsland as a program manager for Broadening Horizons. She has over 10 years of experience in client services and stakeholder engagement. She has a PhD in ancient history, and in 2020, she moved to a dairy farm in Broad Rib River and is enthusiastic about building community and capacity for youth success in East Gippsland. So over to you, Liz.
Thank you so much, Sam. That was a stellar introduction. I hope you can see and hear me okay. So good afternoon and thank you for having me. My name's Liz, and as Sam said, I'm the program manager for Broadening Horizons in Gippsland. If you hadn't heard of us, Broadening Horizons is a Gippsland homegrown program that pairs industry partners with primary and secondary schools in their immediate areas for the benefit of students. Our main aim is to lift young people's aspirations by providing a model for young people to create change and solve problems in their own communities. The partnerships that we broker for schools with industry and community organisations, they are long-term and they're authentic, and they work to deliver high quality career education and world of work exposure for students from grade 3 through to grade 10. The partnerships are quite detailed, and I know that's not what I'm here to talk about, so I won't go into too much of those aspects today, but they do involve a couple of key components that I'd like to touch on. The first is that these partnerships bring mentors into the classroom for a term or more, and they work with a small group of students exclusively. The second is that those mentors work with those student groups to solve an authentic problem of practice, or what we call a wicked problem. That's a kind of problem that the mentors would experience in their own workplace or be working on themselves within their role. The method used to solve the problem, we use design thinking. You may have heard of this kind of learning model referred to as inquiry-based learning in the past. The third component of these partnerships is participation in a community of practice, which is supported by us, the Broadening Horizons program team, wherein we create and facilitate multiple opportunities for partnerships to gather together, share best practice, reflect on experiences, and evolve into stronger and richer relationships year on year. I finished by mentioning the community of practice because this collective has played a significant role in innovating our digital work as a program. Like many organisations in 2020 and 2021, we've experienced numerous setbacks due to the pandemic. The inability for mentors and students to meet face-to-face on school site and the immense difficulties faced by schools as they pivoted to remote learning have been unanticipated and unprecedented. In response to these changes, our community of practice, made up of teachers, school executives, so principals, assistant principals, industry partners and mentors, and students, most importantly, they all supported and provided significant instruction around the creation of an online Broadening Horizons hub, which then we piloted in term 4 of 2020. The creation of this hub provided a shift to a one-stop shop for program participants to interact with students at the centre, all within Department of Education privacy guidelines, of course. So the creation of an online portal or hub, it may not sound particularly innovative or exciting, but for Broadening Horizons, it has provided a huge step up in terms of engagement, connection, and evidence of impact. Like anything in our program, the hub has also been co-designed in partnership with our participants, and that includes students, so having the users at the centre of the design. This has resulted in an online space that's inclusive, program specific, and safe. So depending on who you are, whether it's a teacher, an industry mentor or partner, or a student, when you log in, you would see information that's relevant to you. So a teacher or a mentor might see a link to our practice guide, which provides all the tools that they would need to deliver the design thinking learning model that Broadening Horizons uses. Program participants, including teachers and mentors, will also, by the end of February next year, be able to access a digital learning series, which is all based around delivering Broadening Horizons and delivering professional development in a different way. The idea here is that we are building on the existing hub now that we have, thanks to the pandemic, to deliver professional development in innovative and hopefully fun ways for our partners. So a student that logs onto the hub, or a young person, they will see their school, what organisation their school is partnering with, and what wicked problems are available for them to start working on. They'll also find a bunch of tips and tools to help them through the design thinking learning model that are gauged at their level, plus videos of other students who have finished the program so that they can learn about what's involved directly from their peers. This means that students can drive their own learning and choose to connect with an industry mentor when they're comfortable. The unexpected opportunity that's arisen from developing this type of platform for our program is that industry, schools and students can engage remotely when it suits them. So a school as remote as Malakuta or Omeo that might want to interact with us in the future, or even schools outside Gippsland, they can potentially access wicked problems from an organisation based closer to Melbourne or anywhere within Australia, or think global, think the world. The flip side is that the students can engage with the hub as well and access the information in a safe way so that it's not reliant on Google or other safety controls that have to be put in place by schools. So we've set it up so that partnership and mentorship can start to happen in that online hub space in coordination with things like video conferencing, Slack, etc. The next thing I want to mention about the online space is the evidence of impact. So within the hub, we've embedded a data capture platform, and that means that schools and industry register their information just once a year within that platform, and the hub will then provide them with an impact report for both parties to use within internal discussions of the program and show it to their authoritative figures within their organisations. So students completing Broadening Horizons with the help or direction of a teacher, of course, they can also complete pre, mid and post-program surveys. The survey questions align directly with those asked in the Attitudes to School questionnaires that all schools complete, but with some slight changes. So the idea here is that teaching staff and school executive can then compare how the Broadening Horizons students in their school are going compared to the rest of the school cohort. They can then identify areas for improvement and ones for celebration. They can also strategize on how to enrich their delivery of the program. That about sums up the way our organisation has sought to be innovative in the digital space to support our youth work. The key takeaways that I just want to mention before I wrap up are that one, the platform that we've developed is designed to supplement, not replace, the important face-to-face elements of Broadening Horizons in safe, creative and helpful ways. Two, Even though the pandemic created a situation where our program faced immense challenges, it also moved us in a direction where co-design of an online platform that we had planned on doing, it was much more possible, and it's made it into a richer product for us. The way that the platform will be used to deliver the digital learning series in future is also an example of this. The last point is the fact that the hub has been created through co-design, has meant that each level of program participation will find something useful out of it. It's not just for teachers or just for students, it's for a community of practice. And we think that this element will ensure its longevity. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Liz. It's so great to hear about the work that you've been doing in East Gippsland and bringing it right down to that place-based approach, listening to young people, listening to the needs of community and creating a hub that works for as many stakeholders as possible. Fantastic to see something so specific that you're speaking to there. So our final speaker, before we move into a panel discussion, and folks, if you've got questions for the speakers, pop them there in the Q&A function as well. So our final speaker for this session is Jason McCurry from Children and Young People with Disability Australia, or CYDA. Jason is passionate about diversity and inclusion. He aims to ensure people from diverse backgrounds are provided an opportunity to have a voice and are involved in decision-making relating to key issues in their lives. He has a background in sports management, events management, and diversity and inclusion. He has a lived experience of disability, and he's currently the Youth Leadership and Development Officer at CYDA. So over to you, Jason.
Thanks, Sam. Hey, folks. As Sam said, my name is Jason McCurry, and I use he, him pronouns. Before I start my presentation today, I'd like to provide a visual description of myself. I have short brown hair, a short brown beard with a moustache, blue eyes, and I'm currently wearing a black t-shirt with a navy blazer over the top and an LGBTQIA+ pride pin on my chest. I would also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm calling in from today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations and Wurrung language groups. I'd like to pay my deep respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to acknowledge that wherever we're all calling in from today, we are calling in from stolen Aboriginal land. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. As Sam said, I'm a young person. I grew up in a small town in country Victoria, so it was great to hear Liz speak about some programs running there. I've lived in Naarm or Melbourne for the last 10 years. And more recently, I've gotten involved in diversity, inclusion and disability after coming across from sports and event management. As Sam mentioned, I also have lived experience of disability and mental illness, and I'm fortunate enough to have the role working with a national peak body, Children and Young People with Disability Australia, or CYDA, so CYDA. For the rest of the presentation, I'll refer to it as CYDA. For those of you who don't know, CYDA is the national peak body. We're a representative organisation that represents children and young people with disability all over Australia between the ages of 0 and 25. We provide an important link between the direct experiences of children, young people with disability, their families or caregivers, and the federal government and other sectors in, and other stakeholders in the sector. I am part of our youth action team, which is quite new. It was developed towards the early stages of 2020. I actually started remotely. We're a team of young people that work directly with young people with disability. The young people we work with are mainly between the ages of 15 and 25 in our programs and events. And we run a range of different diverse programs, events, advisory groups, and other external opportunities. Some of you here today from the youth sector might have heard of or attended our inaugural National Youth Disability Summit that took place in September and October last year online. I'd just like to offer a content note that low levels of discussion about COVID-19, the pandemic, related restrictions will be discussed throughout the rest of the presentation. Obviously, it's been a very challenging time for everyone through the last 2 years of the pandemic. Today, I wanted to mainly focus on some of the positives or highlighting the benefits of accessibility and inclusion for people with disability that has directly resulted from moving programs, events, and most other things completely online and using technology more in general due to the pandemic. Technology and online digital environments overall have provided a much more inclusive, accessible, and safe environment for a lot of young people with disability, meaning they're able to fully participate. All of CYDA's programs, events, and advisory group meetings moved to fully online last year, as we've heard from other speakers today and yesterday, and we've made a lot of learnings because of that. The reason that moving to online has created more accessible and inclusive environments is largely due to the ability of meeting participants' access needs. An access need is something a person needs to either communicate, learn, or take part in an activity. Many people have access needs, including those with a disability. You may have heard of a physical access need, such as a ramp for a building for wheelchair users to use. Today, I'm going to talk a bit more about online access needs. So an example of an online access need is live captioning, which YACVic has available today. Just another content note, I'll be briefly discussing ableism through the remainder of my presentation. Unfortunately, we still live in a society where many basic access needs are not met on a daily basis. This results in people with disability either being left out altogether or having a poorer experience. We refer to this as ableism. Ableism is where discrimination takes place in favour of people without disability or impairments, and where people with disability are not fully included or considered. This can be both on an individual and systemic basis. And this is where technology has provided an awesome inclusive solution for many of these things. With almost all events and programs now taking place online, they have become a lot more inclusive, accessible, and safe for people with disability to participate in. Some examples of this, which you might have encountered, and some examples of access needs that we incorporate into our program are live captioning, Auslan interpreters, having regular breaks, the ability to take a screen break or have your camera off through a whole session, the ability to communicate in alternate ways, such as via chat or messaging instead of verbal, and text sizes and contrasts. For us as an organisation that solely works with people with disability, the ability to run our program and events fully online has been a massive learning occurrence and really important. Before we start any of our programs, we ask all participants for their access needs, and this is really important for planning in advance to ensure that we can meet their access needs. There's many other benefits of there's many other benefits that have come from the pandemic, such as the ability to work from home. And more broadly, the ability to watch or live stream performances, gigs, festivals, exhibitions, right from your lounge room. This takes away a lot of the accessibility requirements that physical venues don't always meet. So we mainly use Zoom and Microsoft Teams for all of our programs and events. And obviously I have a lot of built-on functions or add-on functions. Combining these tools with interaction tools such as Google Slides, Discord, Miro, Menti, just to name a few, has been really important to ensure that we can offer quality and inclusive experiences. The technology platforms in general provides a massive opportunity for all of us here today to reach new audiences and more diverse audiences, such as people with disability. There's a real opportunity for all organisations moving forward to continue to offer these inclusive events. The term hybrid has started to get raised, and I guess hybrid is where we move to a new normal, some in-person events, while also online. How hybrid has done well is still in the development stages, but I think it is a real aim, or should be a real aim, for all organisations to aim for hybrid events, to have quality experiences moving forward, to ensure that people who prefer to log in from home still can, and those who prefer to attend in person still can. That's probably going to be the challenging thing for events and programs in the years to come in this new normal. I'll just summarise my key points today, or key takeaways. I could talk forever on this topic. Running programs and events online and using technology has a massive benefit in inclusion and accessibility of young people with disability. You can use these tools to create, to reach a bigger and more diverse audience. I'd encourage you all to research and educate yourselves on access needs and how to meet access needs. I'd encourage you all to ask young people for their online access needs prior to running your programs. Some access needs take longer to meet than others, so planning is required, and asking well in advance can make sure that you can provide a good experience to everyone involved. Throughout your online programs, regularly seek feedback. The beauty of online programs is you can implement changes throughout at any stage. You don't have to wait to the end. And new technology is adapting. I think Zoom has a new update every week. So continue to explore and continue to seek feedback. And then finally, when we do finally move out of restrictions and into this new normal, think of the positives, think of the benefits that have come from this, and continue to try and offer the best hybrid experience possible so that everyone can fully participate. That's all I have for today. So thanks so much for listening, and thanks to YACVic for having me speak today. I hope together we can all work to make the future a more inclusive and accessible world for all. Thanks, Sam.
And no, the thanks go to you, Jason. That was a fantastic presentation, and so great to hear about the work that you do in this space, and the way that you lead, and also the generosity that you've shown to YACVic in sharing your best practice and learnings from the online events that you've run in the past. So massive thank you to you. Okay, we're going to open it up for a bit of a Q&A now. We've got some great questions coming in through the Q&A function. Please feel free to add more questions as we go. There's also going to be a Mentimeter for you, the attendees, to let us know what you thought about during these presentations. Are there things that you're going to do differently after hearing from our speakers today? So that's just gone in the chat box there. Please feel free to fill that Menti in from now. But yeah, I might throw the first question to Juha, and I wanted to ask Juha, based on a couple of questions that have come in, about how we get, we're going to call them older people, but I guess it's kind of people that are slightly averse or less willing to jump on board new ideas in relation to technology. So how do we get those who are less willing to get involved in new tech? And how do we get them upskilled and up to speed? Have you got any experience in that area?
This is something that we bump into a lot when we train practitioners in the youth field. And I think there's an analogy to be made about how to engage young people in activities that we offer. I believe that the best way to engage young people is to find that kind of common interest point in any activity. So for example, I'll mention maker activities, programming, microcontrollers. Offered as such, we might offer them to, I don't know, stereotypically it would be people who are maybe into gaming, LAN parties, that are, we tend to think like, okay, probably they will be interested in this stuff. And we offer it like, check it out, it's cool technology. But then if we take that technology and we combine it, for example, with arts and crafts to enhance that youth work discipline, then it becomes engaging to those people who are into arts and crafts. And I think the same is true in using technology with youth work. And it kind of comes back to what I said about identifying the core of youth work. We shouldn't say that to people who are adverse to technology, like come on, you have to do this because young people use so much technology, but rather look at the youth work core and say, this is how we actually implement the youth work that you are already doing. And it's a lot also about fear of the unknown. So identifying that what you as a practitioner have to take into the online world or to the digital realm is not your expertise on all stuff digital. Like, I'm not a programmer, for example, but I can do microcontrollers with kids, but it's about the youth work. So take your youth work expertise and run with that. And kind of, I feel like when people try something for the first time, that gets them going. So it's about breaking that ice, I think, regardless of age.
Yeah, thanks, Juha, for making that clear distinction. Liz or Jason, do either of you have anything to add on that topic particularly?
I would agree completely with what Juha said, and thank you for the insights. I think Broadening Horizons found that engaging mentors from industry and getting them to use the technology, not as difficult, but sometimes they need a gentle reminder of the benefits to them and their industry and what they get out of it. And we've reached the stage where we are running mentor PD sessions online with our mentors, and they're happy to hop onto Teams and participate in icebreakers online and all of that kind of stuff. So it's been wonderful to see their progression with the technology for the last few months in particular. And now to the point where, because we treat it as a slow burn, you know, you're not going to have somebody jump in straight away and be okay with everything straight away, but with incremental use of the technology, we've found small degrees of success. And now we're at the point where we're co-designing the digital learning series with some of those participants who were super against even remote learning, even trying. So, but now we can bring in those people who are perhaps less warm to the idea into actually being part of the co-design process for the next stage. So bringing in those people who actually have less, I guess, warmth to the process, which is good because you want feedback from those participants the most, because it's going to let you reach more people and then get them engaging and mentoring more young people. So it grows exponentially. So treat it as a slow burn would be my advice.
Yes, yeah, don't try and achieve it immediately, build it over time. Yeah, and there's something that occurs to me that I worry that we've been pushed into using tech, and if it hasn't worked, then that can create a mindset whereby, well, we tried and it doesn't work, which is definitely something I'm being mindful of. Jason, I had another question to throw to you, but feel free to add to those answers if you had anything. And it was particularly about platforms. Courtney's asked, what platforms have you used that work well with young people? You mentioned a couple in your presentation. Do you mind just talking a bit more about what those platforms are and why they might be helpful?
Jason speaking. Thanks, Sam. Yeah, completely agree with you, Juha and Liz, and just wanted to reiterate. I think the importance of sharing best practice or knowledge between your own teams. So having kind of teach the teacher almost. So if one staff member has a skill set or knows the platform better, have some internal training sessions. That can also be considered professional development, even though it's coming internal. In terms of platforms, I think it's a really great question. Sorry, I missed the name of the person that asked it, but great question. I think we're just going to see more and more. I think Liz mentioned that her program was co-design, and I think if you've got young people in your program where you've got a cohort, ask them. They're the user. So, for example, I'd never heard of Discord until we started our Young Leaders program. And I must be an outdated young person, but for example, that they were comfortable on that platform, they already knew it. So why don't we use that? So Discord's similar to Slack. It's kind of a social networking and communication platform. So rather than teach or implement something that young people have to learn, us as a facilitators learnt to use that to communicate with them. In terms of platforms, I think Zoom's the most accessible to use in terms of meetings. I think most young people are used to it these days. There's a lot of really good accessibility add-ons that you can add to it. We find, and I know that some organisations, depending on where you work, if you're government or school, can't use Google. We found Google Slides to be really interactive and really accessible in our programs. And it's live changes, but I understand there's some safety or security issues there for some organisations. Miro, so spelled M-I-R-O, is a really good kind of design thinking, planning, kind of thought-provoking platform that you can use at the same time. And Menti is another really good one, M-E-N-T-I, where you can ask live questions, you can do word jumbles, you can do polls, and it's all live and interactive. But yeah, I think just back to my main point, ask the users, ask the young people, what do they currently use? What do they want to use? And then us as the facilitators, I guess, then research how to use that the best. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Jason. Peter asked a question, well, put a comment in there about getting young people to teach the older people about the tech that they're using. I think, yeah, what a great example of partnership work. We've all got skills to share. The next question, there's a couple of questions that have come in about safety, and I thought I might throw that to Juha. Sean asked, and an anonymous question came in as well. So Sean's question, with the growth and development of online engagement, are there privacy and security needs we should be looking out for on behalf of those young people who engage online?
That's a great question, and something we talked about a lot with practitioners as well, especially in the beginning of the pandemic. Our answer always comes back to, well, that depends on what you're trying to do in each particular platform. I think what gets mixed up is kind of practitioners tend to have the thought that they want to put up one platform to handle everything, and I don't think there is a platform that fits every single youth work need at once. We do have to be prepared to actually look at privacy statements, data security statements from the companies offering the different platforms, and we also have to take the time to understand what is written there and also be explicit about it to young people who we are working with. But then it comes back to what kind of things are we doing on a platform. We often get questions like, okay, can I discuss this and this kind of thing on, for example, our Discord platform? And I always reply back with, well, would you have this discussion at a youth house live? Would you have it in the middle of a living room, or would you go to a more private space to have that kind of discussion? And the same is true in an online environment. You can take that young person and have a discussion on a more secure platform if you need to be discussing sensitive topics or handling personal data. And then there are things like encrypted messengers, etc. Of course, you also have to then take into account local legislation in terms of what you can and cannot discuss with a young person in a certain platform, but that's then a bigger jumble of mixed things. So it pays to be mindful of all these things. But unfortunately, there is no clear-cut answer that would cover all the bases, but it takes a lot of work for sure.
Yeah. thank you so much to everyone. This has been a fantastic conversation. We're running out of time, so what I'm going to do is thank you all for your wonderful presentations. You're welcome to turn your cameras off now. And just before I throw back to Brody, I wanted to just give a shout out to our Learning from COVID-19 resource that Katya linked to earlier in the chat. This is a fantastic project that YACVic's been working on over the last 9 months, interviewing and researching across the Victorian sector to pick up the best practice and aspects of what we've done in the last year and a half that we want to keep hold of, and the learnings that we want to take forward as we go into the next era, whatever that looks like. So Learning from COVID-19 online resource has a heap of accessible resources that are put into different topics and presented differently. So do check them out. There's a live, interactive and free launch event next month as well. I'll put a link in the chat in just a moment, and we'd love to see you there for that. So that's it for me. I'll pass you back to the brilliant Brody, and I'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Wow, I'm feeling very informed and inspired after that awesome session. I'd like to thank all our speakers for coming along today and putting their input into this awesome topic. And thank you to everyone who has tuned in. It has just been so good. I knew lots of things people were talking about, all the different platforms, as Jason mentioned. We've got Zoom and all that. I'm very familiar with Microsoft Teams, but yeah, it's lots of fun doing Zoom, but there is points that I don't like all the different things and buttons you've got to touch, but it's all good fun. But I'm here to wrap up the session and hand off to the next session. I'd just like to remind you all to head to the Menti link in the chat, which should be pasted in there in just a second. And feel free to put your input into this whole topic. We'd really love to know what you think. But now I'm going to hand over to the fabulous Maya as she brings you to the next session. Thank you very, very much, everyone.